Hello Shekhar, how are you feeling?
I'm very glad to be here.
Equity research. Can you explain what exactly that role is about?
Starting from basic research to high-end analytics on stocks and bonds. In the US and Europe, leading merchant banks and investment banks.
You were saying something about PPPs, right?
Correct. Public-private partnerships is a different way of procuring infrastructure projects.
So the projects are taken by the companies for the government.
Correct.
So how do the government decide which company to? Is there any procedure? How did you take this approach?
Depending on the nature of the project,
So what you're doing as an independent consultant is similar to what you were doing in a private firm?
so in a company structure, you typically get the challenge is when we are working with multiple clients, multiple projects.
So are there any particular ways from where private firms fund?
This is how the entire infrastructure financing gamut works.
So if one want to, enter, start their career, is there any particular process or approach? Hello Shekhar, it's very nice of you to have you here.
Thank you.
So how are you feeling?
Good. It's very interesting to see Eduzi growing. It's been doing pretty good work in terms of creating career options to a lot of people, giving that hope that it will help them get into an employable status. So that's pretty good, and I'm very glad to be here.
That's great. Before we delve into details, could you share a bit of your journey and yourself?
Oh, okay. So incidentally, I was just telling that I've just finished 20 years of my MBA. So post MBA, I had started off with equity research as a career. Worked there for about 2 years. This was in Chennai with a firm called Irevna. Subsequently, I had to move back to Hyderabad, and what incidentally happened in the meanwhile was Irevna was took over by CRISIL. So I was looking for opportunities through internal movement in CRISIL. So that's when they said there's something called infrastructure advisory opening in CRISIL. So it happened more by accident, I should say, that I landed up in infrastructure advisory because at that time finding jobs was not, the markets were not very conducive. So that's how I landed up in infrastructure advisory as career, and it turns out to be an area that started getting my liking. I started enjoying the work, the kind of projects, the kind of challenges that infra has, and the impact that one could make by looking at infrastructure as a career. So it all went well. So I'd continued working with CRISIL for about 9 years. Then I'd moved on to KPMG, worked there again in transport and logistics infrastructure for about 2 years. And then I took a short break in the career and started exploring freelancing as an option. Infrastructure advisory, as a job market or as a career option is one thing where independent opportunities are significantly high. What people look for is what quality of projects have you worked on and how many projects do you have on your CV. So basically your CV sells, and you as an individual expert can get associated with any of the firms. So I started exploring that, and thank God, touch wood, things started working well. Of course, except during a couple of years during COVID, where things fell flat. I started working with the firms that I had left before. So CRISIL was the first to give me some, works as independent consultants, then KPMG, and then it went on. So right now I work on 7 to 8 projects. I work with Asian Development Bank as consultant. I work with Infrastructure Development Consultants, which is a boutique firm based in Hyderabad. So we work on projects on tourism sector, on urban infrastructure sector. I work with WRI, which is a funding cum research agency. So there are a couple of projects that I work with them.
Okay.
And then I keep doing some additional works as capacity building programs in PPP, etc., which is passion for me. So I continue that part.
Okay. So you were saying that your first job was as an equity research.
That's
Can
right.
you explain like what exactly that role is about?
Irevna, as an equity research firm, was a part of, I mean, it's part of KPO, as it was called earlier, where it's a third-party office, offshore equity research firm.
Okay.
So Irevna was a pioneer in doing offshore equity research. So we had analysts sitting in India doing research of companies in the US and the Europe. And helping analysts there of leading merchant banks and investment banks take some informed calls. So there was a lot of stuff starting from basic research to high-end analytics that Irevna used to do on stocks and bonds and help analysts there to take right decisions for their clients.
Okay, that's interesting. So you were saying something about PPPs, right?
Correct,
that
correct.
which attracted you more. So can you say something? I personally don't know about anything.
Sure. In fact, PPPs or public-private partnerships is one of the most, I mean, very simply put, it's a different way of procuring infrastructure projects. So typically, infrastructure is a government subject. So by constitution, any country, the responsibility of provision of infrastructure is with the government. Depending on what infrastructure are you looking at, it could be central government or the federal government. There could be provincial or state governments. And there are some infrastructure services which are exclusively reserved for urban local bodies. So for example, if you're looking at cities like Hyderabad or any other cities, the basic municipal services from water supply to sewage, sanitation, urban roads, street lighting are all city level subjects. The urban local body deals with it. So that provision is the jurisdiction and responsibility of a city. Likewise, state has some purview of state highways and power projects, etc. And then central government has larger jurisdiction of, for example, aviation, large power sector, mining, and similar sectors. So while this has been traditionally the way the infrastructure was always provided, eventually most governments have realized that they don't have sufficient monies to create the kind of infrastructure they require, or the kind of efficiencies that infrastructure needs to be delivered were not coming very well from the government side. So, two aspects, private finance and efficiencies. This was where the private sector's participation or the role has come into the picture. So, countries like the UK, Australia have been doing this for almost 5-6 decades, where they have started involving private sector to deliver infrastructure on their behalf. So the ultimate responsibility, of course, to the citizen is still with the government, but they take the help of the private sector to kind of deliver the infrastructure. So private sector comes in, they build the infrastructure on behalf of the government, they bring monies from the markets, and then they also operate and maintain it for a certain period of time, a contractual period of time. So they earn their revenues or recover their capital invested either through user charges. For example, if you look at toll roads, we end up paying tolls at a lot of these highways, which are actually built by private sector who would have invested, say, X thousand crores on a expressway from A to B. But they keep charging tolls through which they recover their capital invested plus a profit over a period of 15, 20, 30 years. So that's a user charge model where the private sector recovers its money. There's another model of it which is called government pay model, which is an annuity payment. So infrastructure is still built by the private sector, but either the nature of the project or the sector is not conducive to charge user charges. So for example, water sector or even the solid waste management sector, people are not very inclined to pay user charges to the companies which come and collect solid waste from their house. So this is where the governments actually take up the responsibility of paying annually to the private sector who builds this infrastructure. It's just that the efficiencies of private sector is what adds a lot of value there. So that's how these work. So that's broadly what PPPs are. The question is, why do we require PPPs? So, grander stories, we are looking at, India talking about a $5 trillion economy, for example. And there's a requirement of close to a $1.5 trillion to go into capital investment into building this infrastructure. Now the question is, does the government have so much money, given there are a lot of social considerations, there are other priorities that the government has, does the government have so much money to build or put this money into this infrastructure? The estimates say that, worst cases, at least 20-25% of these monies, which is close to $300 to $350 billion, will have to come from private sector for us to sustain and reach that $5 trillion economy. So just to give the context of the importance why we require PPPs.
So the projects are taken by the companies for the government.
Correct.
So how do the government decide which company? Is there any procedure?
Yeah. So it's a there's a complete project life cycle. So that is where we consultants come into the picture on advising governments on what projects to take, how to take it, how to structure the projects, and help governments in procuring the right kind of private sector player. So it all starts with, your typical project conceptualization studies. So, government has an intent, there's a service gap. It all starts with service gap. So, for example, if you're talking about water sector, global standards and the national standards say that every citizen should get 120 LPCD of water, which is 120 liters per day of clean water is what is each citizen eligible for. Now, most cities, most towns have this number abysmally low, 70, 60, 50, 40. So what is happening? There's a service gap. My expectation is 120, where I'm standing is about 60, 70 or so. So that's the service level gap. This is a typical process for any infrastructure project to be conceptualized. So once the service gap is realized, there's a lot of options analysis that we do. How do I plug this gap? Again, water sector, there's a bulk water supply, there's a distribution network, there's a metering network. So it is important to realize where is the problem. Do I not have the source, sufficient bulk source, which is supplying water to make it 120 LPCD, or is my pumping capacity not sufficient today to actually push water into the network? Or is it the distribution network which is lacking today, where I don't have pipelines to connect to the households, and therefore, while I have the bulk supply, I'm not still able to meet that target that I have? Or are there any leakages, are there any issues because of which, while the network is there, while the bulk water is there, the water is still not reaching the end user? So, identifying this problem and understanding what the solution is. So that is where the project conceptualization starts. So for example, if I realize in this problem that the distribution network is not good enough, then my immediate next question would be, which areas in the city does not have sufficient distribution network? And therefore my project concept starts there, that I need to have a 100% distribution network to area A in city B, right? So that's where my project conceptualization. Then consultants come into the picture, even of course at the conceptualization stage, but most of the times once the concept is clear with the government, they call in consultants to do a feasibility study for that. So we go into the markets, do feasibility studies to do, what kind of demand is there, what kind of payment capability do the users in this area have. Is there a tariff mechanism that is there in the sector? So if a private sector comes, would he be able to recover the money from the user charges, or would the government will have to pay it? If the government has to pay it, do they have sufficient budgetary surpluses to pay for the services that are being provided, so on and so forth. So those entire feasibility studies, the environmental studies, the technical studies on what technology, what kind of pipeline, what is the sustainability, environmental considerations, social considerations, etc., all go into getting a basics of feasibility study, and which converts then into a financial feasibility model. So the typical, cash flows mechanisms that we do to see if at all the project is implemented with so much cash outflows and a revenue expectation of so much, are there IRRs which are coming out, the NPVs, so on and so forth, and the DSCR. So then the question of value for money comes in. The value for money is basic analysis of if the same project is delivered by a private sector, is the government going to get a positive value for money? So what is value for money? Value for money is a simple comparison of what would the project take if the government does versus what if the private sector does. And if there are efficiencies which are built in, even though the costs are higher slightly if the private sector does it, there might be efficiencies which may be kind of over covering the extra cost that it is putting. So for example, if you look at a simple road sector that we keep looking at, the roads which the government entities most times put, go away just by, get washed away by rain. And then there is a recarpeting that is done. And then there's a contractor who comes up after 6 months, after 1 year, and again does a resurfacing and keeps putting that. So if you look at a 15-year period, compared with how much is the government spending, not just in first time laying the load, but constantly maintaining it, constantly putting in a lot of monies to inefficient contractors, will all get built up and say that, in a 15-year period, if you look at a 10-kilometer stretch, government is spending 100 crores. Where it would have earlier, in the upfront, spent only 30-35 crores to actually put the road, but in the life cycle, it would have spent another 80 crores to just maintain it in order. So 100 crores is what the public sector spent. Compared to what private sector, for example, it would have taken 40 crores to put it upfront. So it might look expensive for the private sector to do, but the kind of quality and the material that the private sector would have used, the maintenance would have gone down substantially. So if the same entity is given the responsibility of maintaining it for next 15 years, he would have taken utmost care to build it well, so that he doesn't spend on an annual payment. So he would have just spent about 30 crores in the overall life cycle for the management versus 80 crores that the government has done. So my overall project cost for the government is 100 crores, my private sector has just spent 70 crores. So there's a 30 crore value for money that is getting generated if a private sector is brought into the picture. So that analysis is done. A lot of times it is not as analytical as it is expected to be because of the lack of data on comparing what government would have spent. But so that is done more at a qualitative and quantitative levels to establish, yes, there's a scope for the private sector to come in. And then it gets into structuring the project. So if the private sector comes in, how do I arrange a commercial arrangement between the government and the private sector so that government is also earning something from the project. So again, if it's a toll road sector, then the private sector would share a percentage of what they are earning to the government each year. So that, for the rights that are given to him, there is some monetary compensation that the government is getting. So that structuring is done, and then it gets into preparing bid documentation, which is, doing the tender documents, determining who is eligible to do a specific project. So understanding that eligibility, evaluating entities for those eligibility and selecting them and contracting. So that's the entire journey of project conceptualization to contracting. And then there's a contract management phase, which is overseeing what the private sector is doing, which is something which has not been done very well in the Indian context. But yeah, so that's an essential part of the overall engagement with the private sector.
So as an independent consultant, how did you take this approach? Like how did you collect the information? As you said, you would take the data and all. How do you take this approach? Like how do you do it? What is your current role?
Sure. So, see, I advise, again, a lot of times along with a larger project team, I'm one of the subject matter experts looking at structuring these projects or doing financial analysis of the projects. So, depending on the nature of the project, of course, there's a lot of research material that is available. There's a lot of analytics that we have to, go by in some cases or, do research to get some data. There's a lot of benchmarking activity that we'll have to do. If, for example, I'm doing financial analysis, getting the right kind of inputs or the assumptions into the project will be important. And that happens partly through a lot of experience that I've built over a period of time. So we know what resources to look for, what kind of data. So if I'm looking at, for example, port sector, which I've worked for 5-6 years, the traffic analysis looks at mapping the entire industries in the hinterland or the influence zone and then looking at what kind of tariffs. So when you're looking at tariffs, there are mechanisms where there are regulated tariffs versus a private sector tariffs. So there are benchmarks which are there, which we use sometimes. There are cold callings we do as if we are customers, and then collect some part of data there. And all of these analytics come into an Excel sheet ultimately to churn the numbers. And when we're looking at IRRs, trying to benchmark them against what is the expectation of the private sector. So for example, the benchmark IRRs will keep differing from sector to sector, right? And also from the nature of the risk that the private sector is going to take. So I'd given you two examples of an example where users pay the money, individual charges, and private sector collects that money. So that is where this particular concept is called demand risk transfer. So the entire demand risk is getting transferred to the private sector. So what is happening, if there are good amount of vehicles that go on that road, the tolls will be high, the revenues and the profits that the private sector is going to be high. On the contrary, if something has happened, there's an industry on the other side which got closed down, because of which the number of cars moving on that side have come down, or the town has moved to the other side of the entire geography, and what was expected on the earlier toll road has not happened. So there is a significant decline in traffic than what I had expected as a private sector. So this is the demand risk that the private sector is now taking. In those cases, the expectation of the IRR or the returns that he's putting is much higher, because he's taking so much risk. Versus a scenario where government is paying annually. So there is no exposure of demand risk that private sector is taking. So irrespective of whether somebody buys the water or gives the waste or not, government has guaranteed me to pay annually so much amount. So banks are a lot more comfortable to lend the money for such projects at a lower interest rate. I am comfortable to put in my equity because I know that I'm going to recover it. So although my returns on this particular kind of projects are lower, I'm still happy with it. Because I'm not taking certain risks. So it's all a game of what kind of risk transfer is happening, what is the appetite of the private sector, what is the economic condition or the cycle in which the particular sector is running, what has been the historical returns on similar projects. So a lot of these are taken into consideration while doing this math and getting the model. So that's how we go ahead doing financial analysis. As far as the structuring and bid documentation and that transaction advisory part is concerned, there's a lot of standardization that is today there. For example, the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance gives what are called model concession documents, model tender documents. So it gives us a framework of how this tendering should happen, what should be ideally, or what should be a guidance criteria for selection of a private sector in certain sectors. And these model documents are now existing across various sectors. For example, the Swachh Bharat Mission in India gives model documents for integrated MSW projects, waste to energy projects, collection and transportation projects within MSW. So these are available today. So as consultants, things have become a lot more easier to actually base our workings on those guidance documents and then deliver to the client what they're looking at. So the challenge, of course, is engaging with the private sector because what happens is, while the government is on its own side conceptualizing, preparing the project, a lot of times the stakeholders are not taken into confidence. So this is how a lot of projects also fail because, the project gets conceptualized, feasibility is done, tender documents done, structuring done. When it is put out for the market is not very happy to take it. So there are no takers for the project. So that's how, that engagement also becomes essential.
So what you're doing as an independent consultant is similar to what you were doing in a private firm?
Largely, yes. It's just that, there's a lot more flexibility when I'm working as an independent expert in terms of the timings that I have versus the nature of the projects that I take. So in a company structure, you typically get what the firm gets and you have to work on it, you have to engage with them. As an individual consultant, it's a lot more flexible for me. The challenge is when we are working with multiple clients, multiple projects, everybody has their own priorities.
Yeah.
So, you know, I typically keep working on 2 to 3 projects simultaneously with clients calling me at parallel times. So managing this becomes a lot more challenging than, you know, when you're working in a firm setup.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong. From what I understood is, since the government could not fund completely, it take helps of private firms.
Correct.
To
Correct.
they take up the projects.
Correct.
So are there any particular ways from where private firms fund? I mean, is they take it from their own pockets or do they take it from public, or
Yeah,
how does it?
that's an interesting question. So, see, this is how the entire infrastructure financing gamut works. Now, you know, typically when you look at financing a project, there are 2 or 3 sources, right? I mean, where your project financing comes. One is the equity, which is what the owner's money is.
Yes.
The second largest component of that financing is your debt or loans.
Oh, okay.
And the entire concept of, you know, your leveraging comes here, where, you know, a 20 to 30% of your equity gets the rest of 70-80% of loans.
Okay.
Third part is what is called grants.
Okay.
Right? This is a mix where the private sector also has an access to take monies from the government in the form of a grant.
Okay.
So, you know, most popular terminology that is used is the viability gap funding.
Okay.
So this is where, you know, again, this comes to the scope when we are doing this project feasibility and project structuring, where the consultants or the government would have realized that, you know, there is this project which is good, which is essential from economic perspective, which will require private sector efficiencies to build, but I don't have money.
Okay.
So therefore, let the private sector do. But the user charges that are coming as a part of this project are insufficient to make this project viable or attractive to the private sector.
Okay.
So how do I really bridge this gap? This is where the government comes up with a partial funding of a project, saying that, you know, I have a project which has an IRR of 16-17%. The objective is to bring it up to 18%. That is when it will start triggering the interest of the private sector. So therefore, I supplement a part of your capital cost. So of the 1,000 crores, for example, is the project cost, I give you 100 to 150 crores upfront, so that your own burden of the entire investment goes down. So now you are having same revenues, same operating costs, but your upfront investment is 850 crores, not the 1,000 crores.
Okay.
So that's the grant part, which again, depending on the sectors, there are various programs that the central government has. VGF scheme is a scheme that is popular in many countries. India also has a VGF scheme under which up to 40% of the project cost is provided by the government, depending on the viability of the project. For example, the Hyderabad Metro that we have is also funded through viability gap mechanism, because the project itself is not very viable. So in some sectors, like social sector projects, there are modifications which are done in the VGF guidelines 2 years back, where up to 60% of the project cost is also provided by the government, just to ensure that the project becomes viable. When I say 40 or 60%, half of it is committed by the central government, and the state government has a choice of supplementing by another half of it. So 20% is guaranteed, up to 20% is guaranteed by the central government. The state government can supplement another 20%. So that is how grants become one more important component. Increasingly, there are a lot of international interests which are coming into Indian infrastructure. So there are cheaper funds which are available, or less expensive funds that are available for the private sector. So this could be pension funds which are coming from different countries. So for example, Canada Pension Fund is one of the active investors into infrastructure in India. So why are these coming into India? Because back in their country, they are getting 2%, 3% returns. India is a market which is growing. The returns are upwards of 10, 12%. So they are looking for investments here. So the private sector, ties up with such funds in other countries to get monies. One of the largest sources to fund infrastructure, though not completely towards private sector, are the multilateral development banks, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank. So they support national governments across across the globe, mostly in Asian countries, to help them build infrastructure. This is done through either grants, upfront grants, or through longer term loans.
Okay.
So, while your banks are exposing themselves and giving you at best 8 years to 10 years loans at 10%, 12% interest, there is a Japanese cooperative agency which is coming and giving you a 25-year loan at a 4% interest. So that's the kind of impact that multilateral funds are creating in the infrastructure in the country. Private sector has access to some of these. For example, World Bank, other than the sovereign funds they have, which are primarily to the governments, they also have a private sector arm which gives longer term loans at a competitive rates to the private sector. So that also becomes one of the sources of raising monies for the private sector.
Okay. So is that only the Indian private firms take up the projects, or is there any chance for the foreign?
No, not really. In fact, the quickest example that will come to your mind is who are managing and operating the airports in the country. So you look at any of the airports that we have, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, all of them have foreign developers also, which are part of the consortiums. So infrastructure has an FDI which is open enough for private sectors to come in. So there's a lot of international investors who are showing interest in Indian assets. So again, large projects, road sector projects, and the airports projects. There's a lot of interest in the some of the areas of urban sector projects. For example, water sector has a lot of foreign players. So there are foreign players who are actively involved in Indian infrastructure.
But don't you think foreign firms involving with our national thing does not threat the Indian private firms?
So see, it is about building capabilities. How many firms in India would have known building airports? So when GMR had bid for the airport project in the country, in Hyderabad, it had absolutely no experience of what an airport is, how to build it, how to operate it, how to run it. All it has done was toll roads, which had absolutely nothing to do with airports. But how did it win? And how is it today one of the most capable players in the country, and probably large part of other countries to develop and run airports? That's because at that point in time, there was Malaysian airports which had partnered with GMR. GMR had tagged along, learning the nuances of how to build the airport, how to run the airport, and that's how capabilities are built. So it is not completely appropriate to say that foreign players are not are threatening the Indian existence, but there are certain ways in which that threat could also be kind of reduced by insisting that at least certain percentage of the SPV which is formed. So typically, again, I'm just digressing, but most of the infrastructure projects, when private sector is doing it, it is done through a special purpose company, which is created just for executing that particular project. And there's an equity structure for that SPC as per the Companies Act. So the governments always have a choice of insisting that not more than 50% of it can be through a foreign player, or at least 51% of it should be an Indian player, so on and so forth. So that way, you're encouraging Indian players as well as opening it up for the foreign players to build their capacities.
So what made you switch to become an independent consultant from working in a private firm?
Yeah, so I've already given you a part of that, the kind of flexibility that it gives. That's largely one of the reasons that, and infrastructure, again, is an area where there are significant opportunities. Whether you align fully with the kind of vision that your firm has, or you are seeking different areas of interest of your own, and also pursuing sectors of your own. So that gives me a lot of flexibility. So in a company structure, I am working in a particular team of a particular sector. So a lot of times I end up just doing projects of that sector, and of course switching is possible, I'm not saying it is not, but frequent switching between sectors and doing things of your interest is something that freelancing readily gives me. capacity building activities, which is of one of my keen interests. I keep taking training programs to a lot of government officers. Again, that level of opportunities in the private, I mean, in a company structure may be limited. Here, I have a lot of network in the infrastructure who I've worked with, or who have worked with me or have seen my work. They just take the phone and give me a call and say that, why don't you take this program? So it becomes a lot more easier when I'm an individual versus in a firm structure. So.
Okay. So if one want to, enter, start their career in this field, what is there any particular process or approach to become any educational background, something like
Not
that?
Not really. So again, I see, if you look at overall infrastructure, what do you have? You have transport, which has all these airports, ports, roads, railways, etc. You have power infrastructure, which has conventional power, renewable power, so on and so forth. You have a large chunk of urban infrastructure, which is a huge part, where you have water, you have urban development, urban planning, sanitation, so on and so forth. And then you have a mining and related infrastructure. So these are broadly 5-6 buckets in which probably we could put infrastructure. Now the question is, there's a common thread across all of this, which is doing your financial analysis, project structuring, etc., where you would require some understanding of your basic financials, financial modeling, understanding the infrastructure financing sector as such. There's significantly large material that is today available on internet. So anybody who has the interest of getting into infrastructure can start there, build their basic math, build their basic Excel, build their basic research capability, presentation capabilities, etc. That's one part of it. For those who are on the planning side, architects, planners, infrastructure designers, etc., there's a large opportunity for them. Again, in the urban infra space, where today cities are struggling to, with the rapid urbanization happening, cities are really struggling to do proper urban planning. So there are specialized institutes which are there who teach, city planning, urban development, infrastructure planning, etc. So one area is the entire financial structuring, contracting part, where you could be MBAs, you could be very sharp graduates, which good knowledge of things, with some background, or a chartered accountant who are, if you are able to do these aspects. And there is a engineering planning aspects where you require probably some level of specialization, of either having a planner degree or a post-graduation on MTech, etc., where you have those planning related backgrounds. So entering, there are a lot of firms who are doing infrastructure advisory, small to big, all the big fours, the Crisils, the Grant Thorntons, the all of them are actively into the infrastructure advisory area. There are ways to get into it. What you require is being smart and being able to communicate, what you've studied, and some basic knowledge of infrastructure, which is out there available in abundance. So that would be a recipe to get in.
Thank you so much. It was pleasure having you here. Thank you for sharing your journey and, subjective matter also. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.